Good day everyone, I'm Ivan, the moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone to today's webinar, Compliance Under Fire, Navigating I-9 Immigration Raids and Worksite Enforcement Actions. I want to introduce our presenter for today, Diane L.D. Diane L.D. is President and Founder of Advantage HR Consulting LLC. Is a senior human resources professional with over 30 years of experience in the HR arena. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, Diane.
Thank you, Ivan. And I want to welcome and thank everyone for joining us today as we discuss I-9 audits and worksite enforcement actions that we know as ICE raids. This webinar will help you in protecting your organization by being prepared and also being compliant. So let's begin. So an I-9 immigration raid or a worksite enforcement action is a serious event. This is where the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Group, otherwise known as ICE, inspects a workplace for unauthorized workers and compliance with immigration laws, such as our I-9s. Employers must be prepared to handle these types of situations lawfully and responsibly. So I'd like to start out by giving you an overview of the I-9 process. What is Form I-9? Who needs to comply? Well, it's a U.S. Citizens and Immigration Services form, USCIS. It was established into law under the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986. So which government agency is responsible for I-9 enforcement? Well, it falls to the U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Group. I mentioned the newest version of the form. It became effective last January. It has an expiration date of May 31st, 2027. So we all know it can be difficult to get our I-9s and that document inspection done when we're dealing with our remote employees. But there are ways that we can make it less of a burden administratively. So now let's talk about completing the Form I-9. There is a timetable for completion that you need to be aware of. So Section 1 of the form. Section 1 asks for some employee information and attestation. The employee's responsibilities in Section 1. Also, they must provide their date of birth. I mentioned those for citizenship or immigration status boxes. Supplement A must be completed by the preparer and or the translator. Supplement B, which used to be Section 3 of the I-9, is where you would update the employee's legal name change. Section 2 of the form. Section 2 is the employer's responsibility, and it's the employer's review and attestation. Section 2 has two fields that require the employer to enter a date. The second field that requires a date is the date the employee presented you with their documentation. So even though the bulk of the responsibilities in Section 2 fall to the employer, the employee is not off the hook in Section 2. So when you're examining the documentation, you must physically examine documents in the presence of the employee. When you're recording documentation onto the I-9, these are just some general tips for when you're completing your I-9s. There are some exceptions to I-9s. So retain, audit, and purge. The employer's goal should be to avoid the risk of discrimination. So now let's talk about I-9 audits. Our external audits, which is obviously when the either ICE or the Department of Labor come in to perform an audit to determine your I-9 compliance. With respect to your internal audits, your self-audits, some best practices when you're making corrections. There's two types of errors the auditor could find. Substantive errors. These are very grave. So now let's talk about ICE workforce enforcement actions, otherwise known as a workplace raid. So ICE can visit your workplace for many reasons. So prior to being the subject of a raid, be prepared during a raid. So with respect to post-raid, so let's now talk about that Form I-200. So what are the key characteristics, the distinctions between I-9s and Form I-200? So companies need to have a response protocol. So employees need to know their rights in these types of situations. Going forward, here are some action steps that can help mitigate any ICE audits for I-9s or those workplace raids. So with respect to key takeaways, compliance is your best defense. A well-informed, well-prepared workforce can help safeguard your organization during uncertain enforcement actions. I again want to thank our participants for joining us today. I hope you found the information that was presented to be informative and helpful.
I want to thank you, Diane. That concludes the session for today. Thank you everyone for participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day ahead. Bye.
Bye, Ivan.